Okay, so now I am in my main theater and I am going to be calibrating my Anthem AVM 70. Now, if you've been following my previous videos, then you know that for the last 3 months, I have enjoyed using the Trinov Altitude 16 and the Trinov Amplitude 16 amplifier. Those were on loan from Trinov. Thank you, Trinov. But now I have to send those back. And so now I am bringing my Anthem AVM 70 back into my main theater and I have to recalibrate it. And I have to recalibrate it for a couple reasons. One, I have changed the layout of the room since I previously had the AVM 70 in my theater. I removed the side couch off of that sidewall. I never liked that to begin with. I still have this brown couch here in the middle, and I've gotten a lot of comments from people saying, get rid of the brown couch. And I 100% agree. Unfortunately, the brown couch has to stay because of its height. It's a long story, but it's short enough to be able to see over the top of it when people are sitting on it, the people on the back row. It doesn't block the view of the screen. In order to replace this couch, I would have to buy something else that is also this low. Anyways, that's not why you're watching this video. But now let's get into how to calibrate the Anthem AVM 70 using the ARC Genesis program. So what you want to do is you want to download the program. So I have a Mac, so I downloaded the app, installed it, and now I am at the main screen. And at this main screen, this is the part where you connect to your device. So you hit Launch ARC, Anthem Room Correction, and it pulls up my Anthem AVM 70. Now, my AVM 70, I currently do have it powered on. You will need to have it powered on. So I have powered that on, and now it's going to connect. It does it right now. There we go. Okay. So this is how I had it configured up in my tiny theater. Because if you remember, if you saw that video, I did kind of an A/B test of the Anthem AVM 70 versus the Onkyo TX RZ50. So basically now what I have to do is I have to redo all of the settings on my AVM 70. So the first step is Imperial. You select Imperial right here if you live in the United States and you live in the only country in the world that does not use the metric system. If you use the metric system, then you would select metric. But for us in the United States, we use Imperial. Okay, and then front ceiling, middle ceiling, and then heights for the height 1 and 2, and then for height 3 is off because I only have 2 sets of height speakers. So this one is measurement A. That's what I just called it, but you can name it anything you want right there, measurement A. I'm just going to call it measurement A. I am going to measure 5 positions. So what that means is 5 different locations around the main listening position. But you can set it up to 10. You can do 10, anywhere from 5 to 10. I'm just going to do 5. Now, this is very important. Where it says front left distance, this is where you manually set the distance from your main listening position to your front left speaker. Now, I measured this distance, and it is exactly 17 feet. So I will increase this to 17 feet. This is critical. You do need to get this correct. I've seen issues where if that's not set correctly, then it can mess up the part where it's trying to set the timing between speakers. I have wides in this theater. This is a 9.2.4 theater, so I'm going to turn on the wides, and then you can see on the diagram there the little wide speakers show up. And then obviously I've got a center channel, I've got surrounds, I've got backs, and then heights 1 and 2. The only speakers I don't have that I could add to this AVM 70 are heights 3, but I don't have a third set of heights. And then for subwoofers, I have 2 subwoofers, and there we go. Then I hit continue, and now I select the mic. Now I've already got the microphone connected over a USB-C cable from the microphone to my laptop, so I will select that, and now we are good to go. And it says initializing, please wait. Measuring from position, they've got a typo here. Measuring from position 1. I think it means from position 1. Yeah, from position 1, position the microphone at ear level and point it towards the ceiling. Now this is critical with the microphone that is provided with the Anthem AVM 70, it is directional. So there's a little dot that has to be facing and pointed towards the front of the room, towards the screen. So I've got that set. So now we hit start and see what happens. So after I ran that first measurement, I remembered, while it was taking the measurement, I remembered that I have a door open at the back of the room. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. So I went, closed the door, and now I have to remeasure what I just measured. So let's see if I can go backwards. Let's go back. We'll select the microphone. All right, now it is initializing. Please wait. Yep. Now we're at measuring form position 1. I think they mean from position 1. So, okay, here we go. We'll try this again. Okay, so now after taking that first measurement, now it's ready to measure the relative delays. And this is where that measurement, having an accurate measurement from your main listening position to the front left is critical. So now it says to place the microphone in the main listening position, which it should already be there because you should always start with the microphone in the main listening position. So it's already in the right place. Now I'm just going to hit resume and it'll measure these delays. Now it's time to do the second measurement. So I will move the microphone to a second location, and I always set my microphone just kind of around the main listening position. I don't usually calibrate for other chairs. I basically kind of optimize it for the main listening position. So I never move it very far away from the main listening position. I just kind of put it in the five points all around the main listening position. Now we're ready for position 3. And anytime or every time you move the microphone to a new location, always make sure that that dot is correctly facing the front of the room. Fourth position. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, we'll do the fourth reading now. We're down to the fifth and final measurement. And now it calculates. And so it says an upload is available. It's ready to upload the settings, but I want to adjust the settings. So now it comes to this point right here. So now we're looking at profile 1. Now this is one of the really cool things about Anthem is that you have actually 4 profiles. So I didn't do a very good job of explaining these profiles in the video originally. And so I wanted to interject here and really explain it better. What these different profiles are is where you basically can completely create a whole different layout. So starting with your speakers, like you can create a layout that includes all of your speakers, say for profile 1. And then for profile 2, you could do like a 2-channel setup. And then maybe you want to create a profile that is just bed layer speakers. So you have your LCRs and your sides and your surrounds and no height speakers, right? Like you can create whatever speaker layout you want. And then you can take it one step further, and each profile you get to adjust the target curve to match what you want it to sound like. So you can make tweaks to the target curve from a high level, but then also for each individual speaker. And then you can do that for each individual profile. So this is kind of difficult to explain, but the point is that Anthem has given us the ability to really create just very granular setups. And then once we create those in these different profiles, we can very easily switch between them once it's up and running. You also can assign these different profiles to different inputs. So say you have your Apple TV plugged into input 1. Well, then you create input 1 and then you assign it to HDMI 1, and then you set your profile 1. But then say you want to have an option to stream Apple Music with a 2-channel setup. Well, then you would create input 2, also using HDMI 1, because that's where the Apple TV is plugged into, but then profile 2. It makes more sense once you get an Anthem and then you get into the interface, but that's basically it from a high level. So I'm just going to have one profile. I'm just going to do the one single profile for now. But if you were going to use multiple profiles, you would check these toggle buttons to enable them. I'm not going to do that, so I'm just going to leave the one enabled. Now we click over to continue on to the next step. So this is where we select the speakers. Now I've already selected the speakers. I've already set them how I want them to be, which is heights 1 and 2, subwoofer 1 and 2, the wides, the backs, the surround center, etc. So, but again, if you were going to have multiple profiles, say you wanted to create a profile for just 2-channel listening, right? Then you would disable all of the other speakers except for the fronts, and then you would be able to have a 2-channel setup. Actually, now that I'm saying that actually sounds like a good idea. I'm going to do that just so we can demonstrate and show how this is done. So I'm going to enable profile 2, and I'm going to create a 2-channel profile. So hit continue. Okay, so now profile 1, we're going to leave everything enabled, right? All of the subs, all of the heights, backs, everything. But for the 2-channel, here in profile 2, I'm going to disable all of the speakers except for the front mains and the subs. I'll, of course, leave the subs enabled, but it's basically going to be 2 speakers and 2 subs. Now, you could disable, say, one of the subs, right? So see how it disappeared? Or you could have no subs if you wanted to. You could just have full range mains. But for my theater here, I'm going to keep both subs enabled, and then we'll have profile 2, and that'll be a 2-channel setup. So now, up here, you'll see where it says profile 1 and then profile 2. Here's where you switch back and forth between these 2 profiles. So now this profile is all of the speakers, and you see them here with their measurements. And then if you switch over to profile 2, you'll see it's just the front right and front left, system-wide target level, and then the 2 subwoofers. So you'll see that that's all we have. So now let's go back to profile 1 and let's take a look at this. So this looks pretty good, and you can see the measurements that it collected from each one of these speakers. Front wide, the surround left, everything looks pretty good. It doesn't look like it's too crazy. The back left and the back right, they do have some nulls and some peaks, but the correction software should kind of smooth those out a bit. And then we have the heights. The heights look good. Those look very, very good because they're pretty uniform. There's not very many nulls. I mean, these are like the biggest nulls there are, and those are only like a few dB. And then these peaks, they'll be the correction software will be able to smooth those out and lower those. So that will be great. And then with the heights 1 and 2, there are some nulls around 3K, 4K hertz. Right there, there's kind of a big drop. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what it does with that. Though actually, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but I limit room correction to 500 hertz and below. I don't like to have any adjustments made above 500 hertz. To me, it just sounds a little too processed, just a little too, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but when I heard it with it off and on, I can tell a distinct difference. So I prefer the 500 hertz and below only. To me, that just sounds warmer, more full, more natural. Now this is interesting. So my subwoofers, you'll notice that I have 2 big nulls on both of the subs, right around 50 hertz. I mean, there's just a major drop off. I have moved the subs around the room. previously, I have, using REW or RU, however you pronounce it, I've used that program to measure these subs pretty much everywhere around the room. And the only place where I can eliminate those massive nulls is if I put the subs directly behind the main listening position, basically right underneath the bar at the back of the room. So I had to take the chairs out, completely out of the room, put the subs there. It eliminated the bar from use. Like, you couldn't sit at the bar, and then I would have people walking back there, with cables and everything. It was kind of a mess. It's just not a great place to have my subs. And so the compromise was I moved the subs back to the front of the room where aesthetically it's much better. They're much more convenient to have them there. But because I have that drop off, what I've done is I've installed bass shakers in my seats here on the second row. And so you still get that tactile bass feel, but the subs are at the front of the room, and now it works well. It works well. Every room has compromises, and this is the big compromise in my room, is that I just don't have a good solution for this issue here with these massive nulls. Now I can boost the subs, which I do. So before I take the measurement, I dial the subs back a little bit, probably instead of like 50% gain or volume, I set it at like 40%. So after I run the room correction, I'll move that volume back up to 50%, so it'll boost it a little bit. But the issue is that if I boost this too much, then it just shakes the whole house. It's so ironic. Like, here in my room, I'm not really feeling it, but 2 flights up, everybody's just like, oh my gosh, we are in a major earthquake, right? Like, it is just shaking the rest of the house off its foundation. Meanwhile, here at the main listening position, it's like, oh, I guess, yeah, that feels all right. Like, that sounds okay. That's an okay volume, So it's just one of those things, and that's the way it works with every room is being different, and every room has compromises, and this is the challenge in my room. So, okay, so everything looks good. Let's hit continue. We'll just leave this all as is. You can adjust these you can change the distance, which I don't recommend that you do. Don't mess with the distance. Don't touch any of it, basically. Just at this point, just leave it as is. So now we'll move on to the next one. Same thing with profile 2. With the 2-channel setup, we're just going to leave this as is. So now you are at the point to adjust the targets. This is the target curve. So this black line shows what the room correction software is aiming for. That's its target. That's what it's going for. And then these other colored lines are the lines that show where it actually is. And when I say where it is, what I mean is that specific frequency. So like 20 hertz right here, the volume at 20 hertz, the level, the dB, is up at 90 for this particular speaker. Oh, don't scroll when this is one thing about ARC Genesis. Where the cursor is affects what happens when you scroll. So make sure you're off to the side. If you want to scroll the whole page, make sure you're off to the side, or better yet, just grab the scroll bar and drag it. That's the best way. Because if you're like on a chart, on a graph, and you try scrolling, it can do wacky things. So heads up on that. Okay, so this target curve. So how do we adjust it? Well, let's start with room gain. Currently, it's at 3.25 dB. So that means it's being boosted by 3.25 dB. Now, what is being boosted? Look at this target curve here. And I'm just going to pull it down, and you'll see the target curve dropping. You see that? Now, we're going to put it back up at 3.25 where it was before. And you'll see it's a little bit higher, and then it drops down here to the rest of the target curve. I actually am going to boost it a little bit more than that. So we're going to put it up at, now bear in mind, this is the adjustment for the system-wide target. In a moment, we're going to look at the target curves for each individual channel, right? So these are each individual speakers, but we're not getting to that yet. This is the system-wide target. So this is kind of what it's doing for all of the channels. So we're going to boost it up. Let's put it up at like 4.75, you'll see that it's up a little bit higher now, and then it drops down, okay? And let's set it at, yeah, 4.75. That's good. Let's leave it there. And then it has a nice slope down. Now, room gain center frequency, it's set at 200 hertz. What does that mean? Well, you see where there's a little drop off right here at 200 hertz? We can adjust that. See how we can push it up to 300 hertz. That's at 300 hertz. So now it's moved that slope over. It shifted it over to 300 hertz. So what that does is it's boosting the frequencies behind this room gain center. So let's put it back at 200 hertz, and that looks pretty good. Again, it's going to come down to how you prefer it to sound. But honestly, unless you have a highly trained ear, like moving this up to 300 hertz versus 200 hertz, because look how much it's shifting it, right? Like it's adjusting it a couple dB at that frequency level. So it's not doing a whole lot. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at 200 hertz. Now the next one is the deep bass boost. Let's take a look at what that does. Right now it's set at 0, but if we push it up to here, let's move it all the way up here. See how that black line is shifting up? This black line right here, the target curve, it's boosting that up. It's boosted at another 3 dB. So this is the deep bass, right? Like, so these are those super low frequencies around 200, or not 200, around 20 hertz. You're boosting it. And this, currently I have it boosted 4.375. That is quite a bit. I don't know that I actually want to boost it quite that much, but maybe let's give it a 2 dB boost. Those low frequencies. So we'll just set it at 2. And then we've got the deep bass boost center frequency. So again, it's going to shift where that slope is. Right now it's set at 50. So let's move it to here. We can move it up. You see how it's shifting there? It's just shifting that line a little bit. And again, this is not going to make a huge noticeable difference. So I'm just going to leave it right there at 50. Sounds good. And then tilt level, right now it's set at 0. We're just going to drag it around. And this one, this is where you set the tilt. So this is the drop off for the higher frequencies. Now remember what I said about how I'm not going to do any room correction above 500 hertz? Well, look what part of the target curve is mostly being affected by this. The frequencies above, I mean, it is affecting them down here below 500 hertz, but most of the effect of this is what is being changed above 500 hertz. So for that reason, this really doesn't matter. Like it's not making that big of a difference because I'm not going to have any room correction above 500 hertz. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the tilt level at 0. And again, this is the tilt start frequency. It's just setting where that tilt is kind of the hinge point, like where it hinges on that adjustment. Okay, so now we've got the system-wide target curve set to my liking. This is about where I like it. I like it boosted on the low end, and then a nice gentle roll off down to 500 hertz, and then beyond 500 hertz, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to be correcting any of these frequencies above 500 hertz. So you can go to each one of the channels and you can adjust the target curve for each one of the channels. For me, I don't typically do that. At some point, maybe I'll get into really, tweaking this and really adjusting it and doing a lot of A/B testing. But for now, I'm not going to get into that. This is also where you set the crossover for each individual channel. I am not going to mess with this. ARC Genesis has set the fronts at 80 hertz for the crossover. I'm going to leave it at that. It set the center at 80 hertz. It set the surrounds at 80 hertz. Wides at 80 hertz. The backs, interestingly, it boosted those up. It boosted the crossover up to 90 hertz. I'm curious about the heights because those have, oh, wow. Okay, heights one. But, okay, I am using bookshelf speakers for my front heights, so I can see why it's able to set the crossover at 80 hertz. but my rear heights, they're in-ceiling speakers. Their low bass extension is not as capable, and so it set the crossover at 110 hertz. So now we get to the part that I have mentioned multiple times, and that is setting the maximum correction frequency. By default, or maybe not by default, but after running the measurements, ARC Genesis has decided that it's going to set the maximum correction frequency at 5,000 hertz. I am going to lower that down to 500 hertz. Right there, that scroll bar. So now it's not going to correct above 500 hertz. And you have to go and do this for each individual channel. Going down here to 500 hertz for the center, and now for the surround, same thing, 500 hertz. And now we will go to continue. Now it's got the same thing for Profile 2. Now Profile 2, reminding you, is my 2-channel setup that I've got set up. So now I'm going to do the same thing. It's actually kind of set the settings to similar to what I ended up setting Profile 1 to. So that actually looks pretty good. I am going to boost the bass a little bit, so the low bass extension. I'm going to, not the frequency, leave that at 50. Deep bass boost. Here we go. Deep bass boost. And you'll see the black target curve line get boosted a little bit. I'll just boost it 2 or 3 dB. There we go. Okay. Maybe 2. I don't want it to be too severe. Okay. So I'll just boost it 2 dB on the deep bass boost, and that looks pretty good. And now I will decrease the room correction, the minimum correction frequency, down to 500. And we'll call it good. And then we'll leave that as is. And now we hit continue. And now is where it calculates the correction curves for every single channel. And here we go. Here we have it. Now at this point, I'm going to run the automatic phase adjustment for the 2 subwoofers. So I'm going to move the microphone back to the main listening position. Now we go over here where it says launch automatic phase adjustment. Okay, so it finished running that optimization. Now, what that phase alignment is doing is, you know, on your subwoofer, that setting, a lot of subwoofers have it where it's like 0 degrees or 180 degrees, and you can just flip it like between the two. You're basically reversing the phase on your subwoofer. But what ARC Genesis is doing here is it's almost infinitely adjusting that dial, so to speak. And so it'll test it at 0, and then it tests it at 10, then at 20, and 30, and 35, and 45, and 65, and all the way. And it's taking a measurement at every single adjustment point and then plotting a chart. So you can see here on this chart, see where the lines, they mostly overlap for the whole spectrum, except around the 50 hertz area. And then you can see a wide range of results. And so each different color line is a different measurement. And so ARC Genesis is able to collect all those measurements and say, okay, you know, this green one, let's say it's at like 120 degrees, that green one up there, that is over 10 dB improvement over 135 degrees. So 135 degrees is about the lowest one, and 120 is the highest. And so it knows to set the phase at 120 to get the absolute best results. So this is a really, really super cool tool that I really like that Anthem has. So I just hit OK, and now it has given us the final option to upload to your device. So that's what I'm going to do now, upload to your device. All right, upload is complete, and it's done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that file. Let's go up here, File, Save, and then I'm going to call it AVM 70, and then I'll put the date today, so I know roughly when I took that measurement. So I save it, and then I can always go back and revisit it. I can adjust it. I can load that file, adjust it, and then load it back on to the Anthem, and there we go. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to check something that is a very, very cool tool that Anthem has. So now we're going to go up here to ARC, and then we're going to select Home. Would you like to save your changes? I already saved it, but just to be safe, I'm going to hit save. Okay, so now this brings us back to the very beginning of the opening screen for ARC Genesis. Now, what this has is a very cool tool called Launch Quick Measure. So we're going to select my Anthem AVM 70, and it'll take just a moment to connect. We will select the mic. It's already connected up. Now, what this is going to do is show you exactly what measurement happens without ARC Genesis versus what happens with ARC Genesis. So if you look down here in the lower left-hand corner, we have Profile 1, so that'll give us the option to choose all of the speakers. Front left, here is the drop-down where you can select, okay, I want to see what is happening with a specific channel. The other one I want to check, because I'm super curious about it, are the subs. I want to see what the subwoofers are doing. So let's do subwoofer 1. I wish you could do it with both subs running, because that would be more valuable, because that's the way you run it when you watch movies, is both subs are enabled. So we're going to do no room correction. Let's see what it does. Okay, yep, there's those pretty massive nulls right there. Doesn't look good. It's got really good frequency response at 20 hertz, so that's awesome. But let's enable ARC and see what happens. Okay, all right. That's a pretty significant improvement, right? Like, you still have a drop off right there at 50 hertz, but instead of it being this massive null that drops down to like 60 dB, it's able to get it up to like 70 dB. So that is a significant improvement. Okay, so let's check subwoofer 2, and let's see what it does. So first we'll do it without room correction. Okay, yeah, it's got a massive peak at 80 hertz. Like, that's just crazy. And then a pretty significant drop off down here at about 40 hertz. So ideally, if it's doing its job correctly, it'll bring this peak down and it'll bring this null up. Let's see if it's able to do that. Yes, indeed. And I think this is a perfect example. This is a perfect example of why some people say, "Oh, I ran room correction and it killed my subs. It absolutely neutered them. I have no bass now." Okay, here's a perfect example. So do you see how there was that massive peak right there at 20 hertz? And then after running the room correction, it brings that peak down. So it's very likely that without room correction, you've got some peaks that are in there that are causing your system. Yeah, you're definitely noticing them. You're like, wow, the bass is really hitting right there, right? But your system overall is way out of balance, because you have these peaks at certain frequencies that you really notice. And then after you run the room correction software, it measures those peaks and then it brings those down to create a more even response across all of the frequencies. So you're not ending up with these obnoxious peaks at certain frequencies, right? And so yeah, I could see where somebody in my situation in this room, they run it without room correction and they're like, wow, the bass is really hitting hard. Well, it's got this massive peak at 20 hertz, right? And then after you run room correction, it brings that down and it's like, what happened to my bass? I don't have any bass left. Well, what they don't realize is that two things. One, now the system is has a smoother frequency response across all the frequencies. And there was a massive null that you weren't noticing at all because you literally couldn't hear it because it wasn't there. There was a massive null at 40 hertz, and now that's been brought up to 70 dB. You know, that's a pretty significant improvement. And so you're now hearing frequencies that were completely invisible before. And so now the response is better overall. So that is something to consider, when people are like, "Oh, room correction just kills subs." Well, not exactly. It's more complicated than that. So based on these results, I am very happy with what it's done with the subs. I think that is a significant improvement. It's doing the best it can with the limitations of this room. Like I explained before, I've tried the sub placement around the entire room, and there just isn't any good place for the subs. This is the best I've got, and it is not great, but in spite of it not being great, ARC Genesis is able to create a pretty decent frequency response curve. So I'm happy with that. So hopefully this was helpful, and thanks for watching.